focus. Ideate, innovate, enable.
In India, workplace sexual harassment has largely been kept out of the public discourse. However, recent high-profile cases have resulted in widespread media attention and shone a spotlight on the topic. Government of India passed the Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act in 2013 with an aim to provide protection against sexual harassment of women at the workplace. With an aim to find out what corporate India can do to implement the provisions of the Act and provide a safe working environment for women, CNBC TV18 and Avagmah organized a power-packed panel discussion titled CEOs Personally Liable, Has India Inc. Woken Up to the Act? On the panel were Vinita Bali, former MD and CEO of Britannia Industries and independent director on the board of multiple companies; Meera Sagi, the first woman president of the Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry; Gaurang Kant, managing partner Kant and Associates; and Karthik KS, founder and CEO Avagmah. Ms. Bali, my first question to you. Now, an important element of the law is creating awareness about it. But how does one go about creating awareness that, such a law exists and such other provisions? How does one go about with that?
I think every company has to include it as part of its communication, frequent communication, as part of its training program. When companies induct new employees, every company, actually every good company, has a schedule of communication and training, and a sensitivity to this act, a sensibility and awareness of this, the implications of this, etc. I think the company is actually responsible for ensuring that as all its employees sign something as basic as a code of conduct which spells out what kind of conduct is expected from employees, this should become an essential part of that training and communication, because only then will implementation be ensured.
Neera, now how can companies create an environment where first, women should be free from sexual harassment at work, and secondly, also, unfortunately, if they do face an incident, they should not be afraid of going up to someone and talking about it?
I think it really comes from the top, and that's why today the topic is very relevant. The CEO's personal liability, irrespective of the fact that it is contained in the Act, in the POSH Act itself, and that's how we like to call it, in the POSH Act itself. But the fact is that it is from the top that the signals come very clearly, that there is a no tolerance policy here, or there is a policy which dismisses such cases or does not take them seriously. After all, even till today, most of the companies are constituted very strongly about male employees, and the sensibility has to be built in that women have individual rights and each workplace has to be safe for them. And for that, like Vinita said, there has to be training, there has to be workshops, and more than that, women have to be in position of responsibility. The moment more and more women are in position of responsibility, they create a voice, and that voice will definitely ensure that it is a more safer working place, because the sensibilities of what the women want and how they want the workplace to evolve for them will become more conducive.
Okay. Karthik, we'll be talking about workplace, but very often we assume that we're talking about the organized sector, but this act also applies to the unorganized and even the rural sectors. What's your thought about how can awareness be created there?
Yeah, so if you look at the organized sector, it's largely contained in the urban areas, and the Act says any institution, which could be a corporate, a hospital, an education institution, any of them, if it is beyond 10 numbers in employees or voluntary employees, etc., they are coming under this Act itself. So it is easy in the urban area because many of them are under a certain structure with a contract, which is an employment agreement, etc. In the unorganized sector or in the rural sector, it is much more difficult and complex for individuals working over there, women working over there to understand the Act. And that's why I think media and the social structure should go forward and create awareness amongst the women, amongst the people to understand this, the law and the implications of the law and the rights and the complaint process that the women can go through. In addition to this, I think the local government body, the labor office, are the ones who can go and create awareness amongst the unorganized sector and the women and the men population out there to understand that. Yeah.
Gaurang, I want to come to you on a point that, so the Act obviously states, has a lot of provisions on the liability of the employer. But suppose, and what an employer should be doing, and let's assume the employer has put into place all the provisions, the committee is set up, etc., etc., but still, unfortunately, there is a sexual harassment case against a woman. What happens then? What happens to the employer? How does that work out? What does the Act state?
Well, the Act, well, let me first point out a few things. What has happened here is that, the corporates are still taking this Act quite seriously, in the sense, they are making themselves aware, and we see that the internal complaints committee in most of the companies are getting formed. But we also have to understand there's a duty cast upon the government at the district level, even at the state level, where they need to set up these committees, the local committees and the district committees, which will look into these sort of complaints. There are certain duties which are cast upon the government under the Act, where they can actually levy penalty up to 50,000 rupees if somebody is not really complying with the provisions of this Act, and they don't really have an internal complaints committee. And none of these things are really being implemented. We don't really see many companies. I tried to look for data and I couldn't really find or see many companies being fined, or many places where the government has actually taken these kind of stringent steps. So I think when you talk about a complaint being put forward to a management, I think the Act is very clear that the management has to have a internal complaints committee. The person would put their complaint over there. There has to be a minimum of 5 people who are going to be sitting on the complaint committee, and 1 NGO member from outside has to be there. This has to be headed by a female, senior-most female person in the company. But there are certain lacunas which are there, because the Act talks about people who are 10 and above. Now, suppose there's only 10 people who are working in a company, and you need to have minimum of 5 people. Then I think the whole implementation of the Act becomes a little more difficult. There are a lot of tuning which, and things which need to really be seen in this Act, and I'm sure it's just come last year. So I think there are a lot of changes which are going to happen. I see more and more cases which are going to happen. Then courts will also dwell upon it, and we'll see more changes happening under the Act.
On that note, it's time for a very short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.